Hi, how's it going? Before I get started here, I just want to let you know, yes, the Speedpaint is my April Fool's Day prank, but I've heard that YouTube has actually been demonetizing entire channels if they use too much copyrighted music, so the actual prank video is up on my side account, Bookfangeek. Click on the iCard for the link to that video. I'll be posting all of my animation memes, map parts, and anything else I make with copyrighted music over there from now on, as I want to one day make YouTube a secondary source of income for myself, and I can't do that if my channel gets demonetized. So be sure to check out Bookfangeek if you want to be notified when I post new videos like that. I mean, I probably will still promote them with the community feature, but you know, if you're interested in following the actual channel, there it is. So, about 3 weeks ago, my friend Jay decided to check in on DeviantArt and left a comment on my profile saying, "Wow, I miss your 2011 speed paints, please go back to the M." And I said, "Wow, thanks for the video idea." My old speed paints were an absolute mess. I used to think that if songs were in a language that I didn't understand, copyright didn't apply to them, so I would use anime openings and Vocaloid songs, and yeah, that's the real reason I use songs like that in my speed paints. They weren't my favorite type of music at all, I just thought copyright was an American-only thing. I was 12, cut me some slack. Worse than that were my horrible credit sequences, where instead of letting each credit linger on screen long enough for them to be read 3 times out loud, as is the rule I always hear in my animation college, every line would crawl by so slowly they could probably be read out loud like 10 times. Middle school me was an absolute mess. But to increase the authentic "this video is something I made back in 2011" feel, I decided that instead of using my current art program, Paint Tool Sci, I'd go back to the free art program I found back when I didn't have money to buy nice programs, Paint.net. Which, by the way, so many people confuse for MS Paint when I tell them what I used to draw on. Not MS Paint. This is MS Paint. With layers! So I had some pretty complicated plans for what I wanted to do with this image, but as soon as I tried drawing, I noticed a pretty big issue. Paint.net was not compatible with my tablet at all. Every time I started drawing, the cursor wouldn't move for about half an inch after I started drawing on my tablet. Which, if you noticed me scribbling and then pausing the recording at the beginning of the video, that was me trying and failing to fix the issue. So yeah, that complicated plan with Gaussian blur shading and a detailed pretty background went straight out the window. I decided I wanted the focus of this piece to be my Sparkle Cat OC from back in 2011, Nip. She's gone through a bunch of design iterations, and I actually just redesigned her last year, but she's been with me since I was actively using Paint.net as my main art program, right down to her main color palette in her first version being ripped straight off the Paint.net default color schemes. So I figured she would be an appropriate focus. Because of the weird tablet lag, she definitely turned out a little funny looking, but that's okay, I still love her. Drawing nothing but cats was definitely a bad habit that was fostered when I found out about warriors, and it's actually kind of one of my biggest regrets as an artist. But you know what, I had fun drawing them, so that's what really matters, isn't it? The main reason I went back to Paint.net was to try out new strategies for approaching art on a program that 12-year-old me didn't really know or understand how to use, just to prove to past me that I was an absolute idiot. But that's part of the reason why I'm sad I never got to do Gaussian blur shading in this image, because the filter was a huge part of my art way back when. I used it for blurring out shading, creating cat coat patterns, and even this. Just this. God, why did I do that? But overall, the shading's not a huge loss. Paint.net is far better suited to pixel art than anything with soft edges anyway. Even past me knew that. I always used aliased lines for outlines and for inner patterns when I'm coloring images. And because Paint.net's ability to fill with an anti-aliasing paint bucket tool didn't become a thing until I'd already moved on to Paint Tool Sci, I thought it'd be cheating if I used it here. Instead of my nice, disgusting, soft shading of old, I decided to pull out a new trick that I genuinely didn't know how to do properly until I started making my webcomic and realized I had to learn it in order to get one page out a week. Cell shading. For those of you unfamiliar with the concept, soft shading is when the shading in your image is blurred out, creating a soft and more realistic effect. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there's cell shading, the technique where an artist creates hard cutoffs for every piece of shading in the image. In my experience, cell shading is significantly harder to pull off than soft shading, as it's easier to hide mistakes with soft shading than it is with cell. So while it wasn't a technique I ever utilized as a kid, it's a technique I could use today to make Paint.net work for me. One thing I also didn't know about as a kid were layer effects. Because of this lack of knowledge, I would shade everything with black and highlight it with white and just turn the opacity down. Now, as an adult, I know this was whack, especially when Paint.net has a multiply function. Using colored shading is something I had to learn to do, but quickly came to love it. It's such a simple way to give an overall mood or a feeling of cohesiveness to the overall scene. I also decided to go a little above and beyond with my shading in this image and actually added some highlights to the piece, which is something I don't really do because I haven't fully gotten the hang of placing them with cell shading to keep the image from looking flat, but I like that it helped the image pop a little more. I do think whatever layer type I used for it was a little too bright, though. The teal on her fur almost turned white wherever I put it down, even when I lowered the brightness and turned the hue a little cooler for the color. The background was definitely an interesting part of this piece to tackle. I knew I wanted it to be somewhat abstract, but I didn't really know what I wanted until I looked at the image. I thought I'd take a stab at doing some light rays coming from the background, and the outlines of them where I'm laying down the framework for the rays are pretty much invisible in the video, but I'll have you know they were also invisible to me while I was drawing. I was basically paint bucketing blind. I thought I'd add a gradient to the background behind the rays to create more visual interest than just a blank purple sheet with yellow spikes on it, and I do enjoy the final aesthetic of the look. I may not have been able to do my soft shading for this piece, but I did do my best to attempt to soften the image by utilizing a layer effect that young me also didn't know about. Gradient overlays. I just threw a couple of them in the opposite corners of the image to make the image feel softer and give a bit of illusion of blurred shading. I don't know if it worked, but hey, I tried at least. Honestly, I'm super thankful that Jay decided to come by and poke fun at me. Because of him, I went back and took a trip down memory lane. I looked back at where I started and then jumped right back to see how far I'd come. The most obvious of these changes is my anatomy and posing. Goodness gracious, that Lionheart image is so bad to me now. But I also learned new techniques, like cell shading and layer effects, and not using eye-bleeding neons to create your OCs, though the jury's still out on that one because Photoshop hates all the colors I use for my OCs every time I color pick something from them. I'm so used to the little warning triangle popping up when I want to use a color such as one of my character's shirts. Oops. Admittedly, when I was a kid, I always said I hated any style that wasn't extremely cartoony, so I don't know if kid me would be happy with my current art style, but if I switched to an anime style just to show her how far I've come in the basics, I'm sure she would be ecstatic. I love redrawing old art and watching my old videos. Being able to see where artists started and how far they've come is so inspiring, and it's why I make it a point to never delete my old YouTube videos or my old DeviantArt images. No matter where you are in life, there's nothing more encouraging than looking back at your old art and realizing, I made it this far. Who knows what my art will become in the future? Thanks so much for watching. Here's your reminder to go check out BookFan Extras so you can keep up with all of my content. Feel free to leave a comment below. Tell me about your old art. What do you think of my old art? Or my current art? Or just tell me about how someone at Starbucks was rude to you, whatever you feel like. Reading comments is one of the biggest sources of entertainment in my socially reclusive life. And don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. All three of those help YouTubers grow their audiences, and they're all completely free to do. Thanks again for checking in, and a special thanks to my patrons, including Suckeychicken, John Klein, SkyYT, Haidn Clark, and Zachary Mullins. Be sure to check out my link tree for more social media links, and I'll see you in whatever my next video is.